this wasn't what I was expecting to be doing at the end of March 2020. A few days ago, I should have been in Ormskirk introducing a talk about a Shakespearean theatre, but like everybody else, Ormskirk and District Family History Society have had to make one or two contingency plans due to the situation that the world now finds itself in, which I think we all know about. Now, as a society, normally this time of year, spring, summer, we would be planning events, we would be thinking about places we can go to, that kind of thing, opportunities to meet people, to talk about their family history, questions and problems and puzzles, which most people have got that are into family history. But of course, we can't do that just now. We're not even having our meetings at the moment. But we've got a backup plan. Because you need a backup plan, and this is ours. We can't do face-to-face meetings at the moment, but we have got this YouTube channel. And because we've got this YouTube channel, we've still got a way to get in touch with the world, and possibly even get in touch with people that wouldn't have been able to come to our meetings anyway because they live abroad, on the other side of the world. So whether you are a member of our society, and that is how you found this video, or whether you just support what we're doing, or whether you just have a general interest in history and family history, that doesn't matter really. The main thing is that you're here, and thank you for watching. A month ago, we actually, as a society, we celebrated our 40th anniversary. But March 2020, just a couple of days ago, we actually marked another big milestone. Because it's 10 years since Ormskirk and District Family History Society first put a project online that was inspired by some research that several of our members had done. Because basically they all found that they were investigating ancestors who either worked as boatmen or married boatmen or were related to other boating families who worked on the Leeds and Liverpool Canal. And from this, a great idea began. So if we could go back, say 250 years in time, we'd be in the year 1770 for a start. We'd be in the era when the Leeds and Liverpool Canal was still being planned. There was no canal, there was no digging out was really been done. It was still in the earliest stages. In fact, one of the earliest meetings was held at the Black Bull Inn in Burnley, in East Lancashire, on the 2nd of November, 1769. A year and 3 days later, over in southwest Lancashire, in our bit of the world, is Halsall Hall, and Halsall is on the canal, and it was in Halsall that the Honourable Charles Moraunt, who lived at the hall, a gentleman, obviously somebody with servants, that kind of thing, property, he ceremonially cut the first bit of earth, and that marked the beginning of the Leeds Liverpool Canal. I imagine that he just did a little light shoveling with his spade. I don't think it was probably a sparkling clean spade, but that didn't matter really, did it? What mattered was that was the beginning of the excavation of the Leeds and Liverpool Canal, and it was a massive project. When you think about it, the fact that it was dug by hand. By the summer of 1774, so nearly 4 years later, the Leeds Intelligencer, they had wonderful newspaper titles in those days, don't you think? The Leeds Intelligencer reported that from Melling, which is near Liverpool, which is technically, Melling is in our area, to the River Douglas, which is up heading towards Parbold way really, and then up to the Ribble, being 17 miles further, the canal is entirely finished. So they'd only been digging, for 4 years, and they'd already done that bit, 17 miles. Now there were financial difficulties for the company along the way, and that was why it was actually 42 years before the Cumberland Packet, another newspaper, was finally able to say, in the autumn of 1816, that stupendous undertaking, the Leeds and Liverpool Canal, is at length complete. It was commenced in 1770. It runs through the stubborn hilly country, 127 miles in length, and connects St George's Channel with the German Ocean. Now you think about that. More than 100 miles of canal was dug out. 100 miles of earth, rock, whatever was under there, was dug out by hand. There's no diggers, there's no machinery, there are spades and shovels and manpower, literal manpower. They were right, it was an absolutely spectacular feat, and I can't imagine it would be done today. And yet even at that point in time, after 40 years of digging, the first generation of boatmen and boatwomen were already taking to the water, because part of the canal already had water in at that point. Parish registers for Rufford, which is in the northern section of our map, show that the boatmen were actually already having children baptised there as early as 1788. So these are probably, those people, 1788, they probably were children or maybe teenagers when the canal project first began. And when the canal opened in 1816, those children that were being baptised in the 1780s, of course, would have had children of their own probably. And that's how you start a family tree. But now we've got a problem, haven't we? How do you trace a boatman's family? Because canal barges are designed to go on the water, of course. Which means that they move from place to place. It might only be 4 miles an hour, but that's still quite a distance you can cover in a day. And if they move, so do the people steering them. And of course, if you have you're a newly married husband with a wife and maybe a couple of children, and maybe there's another one on the way, maybe your wife and your little ones, while they're still little and manageable, are on board with you. And the thing is, if there is a baby on the way, babies generally don't want to wait until you get back home to wherever your home village is. If they're ready to be born when you're in Skipton and you actually live in Scarisbrick, then you're just going to have to moor the boat up for a day or two, aren't you? Because they're going to be born. One classic example that you can find on our Boat Family's website is that of Richard Robinson. He was born in Burscough in 1856, and his parents were from Rufford, which is not really too far away. His wife Elizabeth Barrow is from Latham. Latham is only a mile or two down the canal, so they're all quite local at this point. So Richard and Elizabeth have 2 children at Burscough. They have a third at Halsall, so we're heading towards Liverpool. A 4th one in Bradford, so we're going back in the other direction. The 5th, 6th and 7th are born in Burscough and Latham, so we're back over West Lancs. And the last 3 in Blackburn, so we're on East Lancs there. Henry, the child who was actually born in Bradford, was really interesting because according to our Boat Family's website, there's a note to say that his baptism record gives the family address as on Canal Boat, and I'm sure that's where he was born too. Because this lifestyle actually involves a lot of travel, and it does make sense that a boatman might marry the daughter or the sister of another boatman, because the wife might want to live on board at first until they find a permanent address in maybe a canal side village like Latham, Burscough, Scarisbrick, Lydiate, just to give some examples from our map. And really having a base on dry land is a lot safer than having children running around the barge and babies crawling around the deck. You don't want that, really. But when these families are having children up and down the length of the canal, that's going to test the skills of even the most determined family historian. So this little group of members of our society, of Ormskirk and District Family History Society, who were all looking at people that ancestors that happened to be boatmen, discovered that their research was starting to overlap. They're finding that actually they're researching the same names, the same people seem to be coming up here, there and everywhere. Somebody's connected to somebody else, somebody is somebody's brother, somebody marries somebody's cousin, that kind of thing. They're all tracing each other's families, and suddenly there is the potential to create one great big family tree. And that is what they did. And that is how they ended up with a database of 3,000 individuals. And that was on the 20th, that was actually launched at our meeting on the 24th of March 2010, so it's already a decade ago. Now, in the course of this video, I will mention a few websites that have been very useful to our research. They aren't the only resources out there. If you Google Canal history, Canal family, something like that, you're bound to find loads. But they might be the ones that are easiest for you to look at from the comfort of your own home, from your own laptop, phone, tablet, whatever you're using to access the internet. So I'm going to put the links to some of those in the description box below. Now, you might obviously wonder, we built this boat families database, but what kinds of records did we use to create this boat family site? How do you piece all these things together? Well, the first and most obvious way to find out somebody's occupation and hopefully their address, even if they're not in the place you expect them to be, is the census. Look at the census records. You've got names, you've got relationships, you've got occupations, you've got birthplaces, ages. Hopefully, if you're really lucky, there might be a brother, sister, mother, cousin living with them at the same time. So that's another branch out onto the family tree. Census records are the perfect starting point. And when the Boat Families website went live back in 2010, of course, the 1911 census was not yet available for general research purposes. Well, just wasn't available to the public because of the 100-year closure. And so our volunteers were mainly looking at whatever research, whatever information they could find using the 1841 to 1901 censuses. And to be fair, when you've got that much data, you've got plenty to work on to start with, haven't you? Now, our society's map includes the village of Latham. That Latham is on our map. Latham is actually quite a significant place in terms of the structure, the direction of the Leeds to Liverpool Canal, because it's at Latham, at Top Locks, where the main branch of the canal, the main strand that goes from Leeds to Liverpool, actually meets up with another arm of the canal, which is known as the Rufford branch. That goes north from Latham all the way up to basically Hesketh and Beaconsall. It meets with, I suppose, with the sea, and there's also the River Ribble. That place, you can still go to there. You can still walk round it if you like. It's just, it is what it is. It's the meeting point of two canals, and it's generally known locally as Top Locks. So, we find all these people on the census. Now that's one way to identify who the boatmen and the boatwomen were. But there are other resources that you can use as well. It's not just the censuses or nothing. From 1813, as you probably know if you've ever looked for your ancestors' baptism, marriage, burial, that kind of thing, the Church of England issued standardised, pre-printed registers that seem to have been issued to all parishes for the purpose of recording baptisms, marriages, burials. The baptism registers generally include a space to note down not only the parent's name but the address. It may be really specific, it may be somebody actually puts down the cottage or the house that they're living in, maybe they just put the village or the town, they might just put Latham, Burscough, Rufford, whatever, in the address box, and critically they start to include the occupation of the baby's father, or in the case of illegitimacy it might just be the baby's mother. So our volunteers got together and they started literally combing through all the local parish records that they could find, noting down all the references to boatmen that they could find, and flatmen and related occupations. Now I wasn't involved in that, and I hate to think how long it must have taken, but the results were collated and we now keep them in our research library. So all of those hours of research enabled us to trace quite a number of boat families quite a long way back before the 1841 census. In some cases we got them as far back as the mid-1700s, so we're getting to the point where you've got people who would have been growing up as the canal was actually starting to be excavated, so they must have seen a lot of change. Just from the period of their childhood to their adult life to old age. That's a lot of change. Now Ormskirk is not on the canal, but the parish of Ormskirk does cover the outlying villages of Latham, Burscough, Skaysbrook, which are on the canal. And from the lists that we just saw, we saw that Thomas Melling, a boatman, and Hannah Melling, a boatwoman, lived at Toplocks in Latham. A little bit of digging in the parish records shows that, as you might have expected, they are husband and wife, and they had various children baptised at St John's Chapel at Latham. This was originally a chantry chapel within Ormskirk Parish, so any events that took place, it seems to have been usually christenings, at Latham Chapel were copied up into the Ormskirk register, so you tend to find there's a bit of duplication going on. And from these records it soon becomes clear that Thomas Melling had been a boatman for quite a while, and that he and his wife Anne or Hannah, it's one of those interchangeable names depending on how people say it and how people want to shorten it, are listed on a boat family's website, and as you can see from the following parish registers. So using all sorts of church records, including some which are now available on the excellent Lancashire Online Parish Clerk's website, a brilliant, absolutely free, volunteer-led resource that holds all sorts of church records from across Lancashire. Using those and other local parish records, things that we found in the Lancashire archives, our researchers were able to piece together the records relating to Thomas and Hannah's lives, who their children were, when they got married, that kind of thing, and assemble them to create a family page on the Boat Families website. So if you search for Thomas Melling, born in 1799 in Latham, you can find the names of his parents, William Melling and Ellen Georgeson, and you can also learn that he had in fact got 9 brothers and sisters, so he's from quite a big family. Like all resources, the Boat Families website has its limitations. It is not a comprehensive record of all the boatmen who ever worked in England, Wales, Scotland, anything like that, or even all the boatmen in Lancashire. New data is being added every few months. It's as of the 10th of March 2020, so that's a fortnight shy of the 10th anniversary of the website. It's actually been revised 109 times since it was created. We're on version 110. So things are getting changed quite regularly. But another thing to bear in mind is that there are a huge number of resources that we haven't yet really explored, that we might one day be able to link up to the individuals on the Boat Families database to give a bit more of an impression of how they lived and what they experienced. In some cases, those little extra snippets are going on the website as we find them, but it really is a case of members and interested researchers finding them, forwarding them to us, and we then get them to our webmaster, who then takes care of that side of thing. So, for instance, one really obvious resource is the things that are kept at the Lancashire archives. Although they are closed at the moment due to the current situation, their online catalogue is still freely accessible on the internet and easy enough to search. So here we have got just a couple of examples of things that you can find relating to local boatmen, which are simply found by searching for boatmen. It's that simple. Now, of course, sometimes these records will take you on a path that you might not necessarily be expecting to follow. They can also give you a little bit of a flavour of, to put it delicately, what people might have been doing when they weren't working. Maintenance. Essentially, what we've got here is like an early form of I suppose like child maintenance. It's halfway between an agreement to pay child maintenance and a sort of paternity test without the technology to do a paternity test. James Thompson was not married to Betty Forshaw, but this order compelled him to pay towards the upkeep of his illegitimate daughter, until she is old enough to either work, maybe she goes out to become a domestic servant somewhere, or until she's old enough to be apprenticed to somebody. You know, maybe she went on to become a dressmaker or something like that, and an older woman took her on as an apprentice, trained her up, showed her what to do, that kind of thing. So that's quite a usual thing to happen with maintenance and affiliation orders anyway. But what we can tell from this record, of course, is that this baby had to have been born by mid-April 1800. Probably born in Latham, because that is where it's implied that her mum Betty Forshaw lived. And we know that she's a girl. We know that her mum is called Betty. Elizabeth, of course, is a variant form, so that's a possibility. And sure enough, when you look at the parish registers for Ormskirk, you can find a matching record. Now, there are countless examples of this type of thing. People's names coming up in the quarter sessions for whatever reason, and it isn't always immediately obvious, particularly if you've got people with quite a commonly occurring name on the boat family's website, or indeed just a local name that tends to come up a lot, Wholesale being a classic example. It isn't always obvious where these people might fit into our boat family's database, but just this glimpse at these records does show that there is an awful lot of potential to expand it in different ways, and just bring in a few more details about the lives of these individuals and the people they were connected to. There's something else that has got the potential to be really, really useful, and that is historic newspapers. You can learn an awful lot about. The census is only taken every 10 years. Newspapers are printed sometimes every day, sometimes every week, every fortnight, something like that. So that's, if your ancestor happened to be in the news for some reason, you've got a lot more chance of filling in the gaps between the census records using something like newspaper records or parish records than anything else. Newspapers tend to include all sorts of stories. For instance, in February 1859, the Preston Chronicle reports that a Richard Maudsley, a boatman from Burscough, was helping his brother to get a boat through the locks at Rufford. Unfortunately, now many of you will be aware that it is generally frowned upon these days to drink alcohol and get into your car or other means of transport. It's not usually a sensible thing. It affects your coordination and response times, as we all know. And unfortunately for Richard, Richard was drunk and he did fall in the water. Somehow, obviously somebody was sober around there. Somebody managed to fish him out, but as the report so delicately put it, he expired and was buried at Burscough a few days later, and that was the end of Richard Maudsley. So it's a very sudden death, and when you look at the boat family's website, and you might be thinking to yourself, well, how on earth why would he die? He's only 27 or 32 or whatever he is. That might be the answer. The answer might be hiding in the newspapers. And of course the Canal is a cross-county network. It's like, I suppose it's like the equivalent of lorries moving from Lancashire to Yorkshire via the M62 now. It was the equivalent of the motorway. All kinds of things are being moved up and down the canal. Various goods are coming in on boats at Liverpool Wool is going west from Yorkshire. Coal is being moved on down from Wigan and anywhere else that they care to be mining coal. They're just some of the examples that I've picked up off the top of my head. Now, coal was needed as fuel for heavy industry, but people are also using it to heat their homes. And you can imagine, if you're not a particularly well-paid person, for whatever reason, if you walk past a barge full of coal, as Joseph Gore, the son of a Burscough boatman, did in 1869, it's not surprising that you might be tempted to help yourself, which is what Joseph Gore did. But unfortunately for Joseph Gore, he picked the wrong boat to steal coal from, because this boat belonged to a Mr. Morris, who was a colliery owner from Wigan. So it was a colliery owner who's probably got quite a lot of money and it's probably not too expensive for Mr. Morris to prosecute a Joseph. So, particularly stupid move there on Joseph's part, particularly because once that boat had actually got to Liverpool, and it had been safely docked, Mr. Morris, the colliery owner, generally gave the captains a supply of coal anyway. So the chances are, if Joseph was a captain of a boat loading coal, he would have got some coal anyway. And because he couldn't wait, because he gave in to temptation, he was sent to prison for 6 weeks. And another well-known difficulty actually came with World War One, because especially once it got to like 1916, that kind of period when conscription was coming in, because boatmen started to be called up for military service. You'd think they would have a perfectly legitimate reason to stay in Britain. They're moving goods up and down the canal, that's their family's way of life, that's their family's means of surviving. So the work that they're doing is important not just to industry but to them personally. And in early 1917, a Mrs. Abraham of Summerwood Lane in Halsall actually came to court to plead the case for her son Peter. Peter Abraham was 21 years old, he was a boatman, and essentially she said that if he was called up, if he went to war, she had got a huge problem because she herself was not accustomed to steering a canal boat. I'm sure she could probably have done it, but if you are faced with having to do this and you've never done it before, I suppose that would be like somebody saying, you know how to ride a bike, therefore go on and fly an aeroplane. It probably seemed that much of a leap to her. And you can imagine that if Peter went to war, the boat couldn't sail, the cargo couldn't be carried, and in the most drastic scenario, perhaps his mum would have actually had to rely on charity or maybe go and live with her own relatives in order to survive. So on those grounds, the court sensibly recognised that the work that Peter was doing was valuable, and Peter Abraham was allowed to stay in Halsall. So there are all kinds of little incidents like that sort of bring these families to life a bit more. They stop just being names on the census and they start to be people, which is what they were all along. So to go back to my earlier point, if you are somebody sailing a barge, if you are a boatman, your life is going to involve travel, and probably your family is going to do a fair bit of travelling as well. The nature of moving things by canal is going to mean that you might very well be in Liverpool one week. in Burscough the next week, you might be in Skipton the week after that, you could be in Leeds at the end of the month. Over the last 10 years, because of this, we've actually found that the boatmen and women that we have been tracing as we've put this website together have gone far, far beyond the Ormskirk area. We are way beyond the confines of our society's map now. And we're not just talking about people that are going as far as Liverpool or as far as Leeds. We're actually now, we've hit the point now where we are looking at people who moved on to other canal networks. There were other canal networks. You've got the Shropshire Union on the Grand Union, which goes through Birmingham, as I recall. So if you search the website by birthplace, which you can quite easily do, of course these families are meeting and marrying and may well be distantly connected to other boat families from other parts of the country, and so it all becomes one big happy family, literally. So if you search the website by birthplace, you will actually find that there are references to Blackburn and Burnley in Lancashire. There are King Swinford and Dudley people from Staffordshire. There are people who were born in Stourport in Worcestershire. There are even people who were born in Bridgnorth and Market Drayton in Shropshire. So this boat families network, it is a network. It's not just a little tiny specialist Burscough based project anymore. It's rapidly becoming a national database, which is phenomenal, really, to say this. It's all been done by volunteers. It's incredible. When we began this project, it began as a few intermarriages between a few families in the Burscough area, and even then we managed to get to a family tree of about 3,000 people, all intermarried. 10 years on, there are not 3,000 people on the Boat Families database. At the moment, there are 47,500. No, but the other thing to bear in mind with that is that for reasons of privacy, obviously, and we cannot literally check up to make sure that everybody is necessarily living or dead, nobody born after 1920 is included on the database. So, particularly if we have reason to suppose that they may well still be alive. So, what the important thing about this, though, is that we are always open to receiving new data, because you might know something that we don't know. You might be related to some of these people on the Boat Families website. You might have spotted your granddad, great-granddad, great-great-granddad. You might have found that you're, 4 generations back of boatmen, something like that. And if you think that your ancestors might actually fit into our Boat Families tree somewhere, and you can't seem to find them on our website, then please do get in touch, because have a browse through the site, just look and see if there's any names that do match up, and if you've got some kind of proof that you're connected to them somehow, maybe you've got marriage certificate that you're happy to scan and send to us, something like that, or just some general information. If you can contribute anything of that kind, then we would love to hear from you, because it started off, we never intended it to be a complete project when it started. I hope it will still be going in 10 years' time, when it's 30, when 2030. So we don't see it as a complete project, it's just something organic, it keeps growing, pretty much like your family tree does. If you would like to leave a comment or question or anything like that in the comments box, please feel free to do so. If you want to share the video, please feel free to do that as well. We would love to know what you think, and if you are trying to find out how you might research your boat family ancestors and you're not quite sure where to start, we can probably help you with that as well, or at least give you some suggestions. So thank you for listening, and please do feel free to let us know what you think of this video.